Our fourth scripture reading is Luke chapter 15, continuing through the end of the chapter. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, "Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound." Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, "Look, I've served you all these years and I never disobeyed your instruction, yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him." Then his father said, "Son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, today's scriptures give us much to savor, much to think about, and much to enjoy. They also invite us to ask several questions. But before we get to those, let me tell you a story. Somebody asked me just the other day how my husband Dusty and I met. And a number of you have heard this story before, but for those who have not, I first saw Dusty on a Zoom meeting during COVID. Every week, the pastors here in Topeka would meet online with then Mayor Michelle de la Isla and talk about how to keep our congregations safe during the pandemic. We did this every week. And I would Zoom in, but I stepped back for a while after my late husband, Rod Brown, passed away very suddenly in November of that year. And when I resumed attending those meetings, I noticed that there was this person named Dusty who always had a role in the meetings. But I didn't know who he was, so I did what any sensible person would do and promptly Googled him. And up popped a lengthy article in the Topeka Capital Journal dated April 18th, 2020, titled, "While Mourning Love of His Life, Nichols Leads COVID-19 Response." And there were pictures of Dusty wearing a black Blondie t-shirt. He did not look like a pastor. The article basically described his entire background, including his job in emergency management and his role as incident commander during COVID. And I learned that Dusty had been in the Air Force, was very involved in the theater, and had lost his fiancée, Wendy Ash Long, to stage 4 colon cancer in August of 2019. Wow, I thought, I know what that's like. I kept reading and learned that, like me, Dusty had been divorced and that we had graduated from high school in the same year. And I could tell from the way he talked about Wendy in the article that Dusty was somebody who loved hard. And I said to myself, well, someday he needs to meet me. It wasn't time to meet yet because I was busy mourning the love of my life. But even after the weekly Zoom meetings for Topeka pastors concluded, because people were getting vaccinated and we were back to worshiping in person again, I didn't forget about Dusty. I knew it would be up to me to reach out, because while I knew a whole bunch of his story, he didn't know me or anything about me except that I was one of a handful of female pastors in those Zoom meetings. Well, sometime in the spring of 22, I friended him on Facebook, and he still looked like somebody who needed to meet me. Then one lovely June morning, Sunday morning, Walt Menninger invited me to join him for lunch at Perkins, as he sometimes does, and said that Michelle de la Isla would be there too. And I thought, now's my chance. So over lunch, I asked Michelle, hey, I see you and Dusty seem to be pretty good friends. Is there an appropriate way for me to meet him? He's the only person my age I know who's had a loss like mine. And she looked at me thoughtfully for a minute and then said, yes, I'll tell him about you. Well, a week or two later, I got a message from Dusty on Facebook Messenger, and we set up a time to meet for coffee at Blackbird, and we ended up talking for several hours that first meeting. And that was that. Frequently, during those early months of dating, and even sometimes still today, Dusty will say, thank you for finding me. Because if I had not gone and searched him out, we might never have met. And usually it's, thank you for finding me. What took you so long? Our 3 parables today do not need much explaining. The beauty of hearing all 3 of them together in one worship service, which does not happen very often, is the way they really drive the point home that even one lost person turning back to God is the only excuse heaven needs to throw an extravagant, joyful party. 1 lost coin, 1 lost sheep, 1 lost son. The joy of finding and being found. There's nothing quite like it. Though Dusty and I were not lost in the classic sense of the word, we continue to feel great joy in finding each other, perhaps in part because we've had losses. One question to ask ourselves is, who out there needs us to find them? Who needs our friendship? Who needs our concern for their well-being? Who needs to be included in our gatherings? Who needs to be offered a ride? Who needs you to listen to their story, or perhaps to hear yours? Who do you know who seems a little lost? Maybe you are the one that God is calling to seek them out. Another question is, what, if anything, is keeping you from joining the party? All 3 of our stories have a celebration at the end, but in the story of the father with 2 sons, not everyone is celebrating. Much has been written and said about the bitter older son who stays outside, sniffing the barbecue, hearing the music, peering in at the dancing. A lot of us relate more to the older son than the younger one. We struggle when people, especially people close to us, get blessings and grace we don't think they deserve. Older brother mentality is everywhere, and it is not pretty. Boundaries are healthy, good, and necessary, But judgment and resentment are toxic, and all they do in the end is keep us out of the party. Like the older son referring to his younger brother as your son instead of my brother. We don't always want to acknowledge how connected we truly are to each other, that those awful people, whoever our awful people are just as beloved by the Father as we are. And that instead of sharing our disgust, the Father goes and gives them a party, a gala, a big, fancy, expensive blowout. Sometimes we would rather miss the party, staying outside, eating tasteless, gluey protein bars of righteousness, than go inside and celebrate someone who has offended us. The good news is that the Father goes out to welcome both sons, the prodigal who comes to his senses and repents, and the older brother who turns his back on his family. The parable ends and we don't know what the older brother ends up doing, do we? Maybe his own hard-heartedness has turned him into the son that will be lost. Or maybe his father's words sink in, and eventually he comes inside and joins the celebration. Again, what holds us back from celebrating today? Have we, like the older son, become someone who doesn't even realize how close he is to being lost? And third, when Dusty and I got married, we celebrated. It didn't matter that we'd both been married before. Our joy needed to be shared, so we did it. We did all the things: dinner, cake, dancing, glow sticks. We even had an outfit change after the ceremony so we could dance better. People who had known us when I lost Rod and Dusty lost Wendy rejoiced that we had found each other. The thing about joy is that it isn't really complete until it is shared. And when you share it, it grows and it's contagious. So think for a minute about a baby laughing and giggling with delight when a dog licks her hand, and how you have to go show everybody the video of how cute and precious they are. Think of how when you get some good news, say good news at the doctor's office after a surgery or long illness, you can't wait to get on the phone and share that news with your family. Joy is one of the threads that ties our stories together today. Joyful celebration when something or someone precious is found. It invites us to ask, how can we make celebration a bigger part of our lives as individuals, as families, as a church? After all, not only is celebration fun, it's a form of witness. We are telling the world something important when we celebrate, that we belong to God, and the joy of the Lord is our strength, as it says in Nehemiah. Yes, lament is important too. It's important to grieve the things we've lost and the parts of our world that are not as they should be. Being joyful does not mean we have to be happy all the time. But sometimes, and probably a lot more frequently than we actually do it, we need to celebrate, and nothing else will do. Sometimes we need to sing and dance and eat things with lots of sprinkles on them. Sometimes we need to laugh and clap and yell and wear sparkly or colorful clothes and fun shoes. And sometimes we need streamers and party blowers and party hats and confetti and drinks with bubbles in them. Sometimes we just have to get out the good china and the good silver and use that stuff if we have it. Sometimes we just got to have a hot dog and nachos and a cold beer. And sometimes we just got to have bright red lipstick and sparkly eyeshadow and tiaras. Because God comes looking for each one of us. And God never gives up until we are found. And your son or daughter who isn't speaking to you is found. And the baby you lost is found. And all the dogs and cats and horses you have ever loved. Even our memories and ideas and forgotten dreams. And yes, God finds the people we kind of sort of wish could stay lost. But that's okay, because we are all going to be transformed in the end anyway. So how can we not celebrate? Who needs you to find them? What, if anything, holds you back from coming to the party? And how can we do more celebrating?